Press.
Okay, so first of all, today's learning should be, in addition to all those in Eretz Yisrael, that's protection and Yeshua's, it's also being dedicated by Elazar Nishmas, Ramosha ben Nachman Alevi, and Mordechai ben Aaron, and Miriam Gittel Bas Zev Nechemia, Neshama Shev Aliyah. So we're up to the bottom of Tzadi Gimel Amid Beis. We're about 8 lines from the bottom. Let me just review what the Mishnah has been talking about. The Mishnah said that if a person steals something, we obviously know you have to return the item. But if a person changes the item and makes a shinoi, then the halacha is, at least from the Mishnah, then the halacha is that you're koina the item, and you don't have to return the item itself. You return the value of the item at the time of the theft. We then mentioned that there's 2 different forms of shinois. There's a shinoi that's an irreversible change. That's a biblical kinyan, and then there's a reversible change, which is only rabbinic. Fine. We mentioned throughout this daf is that there's a shita of Rav Shimon ben Yehuda. Rav Shimon ben Yehuda, quoted Rav Shimon, is saying that whitening, that dyeing wool is not a shinoi, and the Gemara now is going to understand this. What this means is they hold that shinoi is not koina, meaning we've been going with this whole premise that making a shinoi is koina. We're not going to see the Tanaim that don't hold that way. So the Gemara says, Amar Abaya. Abaya says, Rav Shimon ben Yehuda, Beis Shammai, Rav Elazar ben Yaakov, Rav Shimon Elazar, and Rabbi Shmuel, all these 5 Tanaim, Kulu Svirlu, Shinoi bim Kaimei Oimed. All of them hold that Shinoi is not Kaina. For different halachas, for different scenarios, for our context, it would be that you return the item that's stolen, but it could have many, many ramifications in different halachas. Now, by the way, Taisus. Okay, so let's start the Gemara. We'll see Taisus for a second. The Gemara says, let's go through each one. Now, Rav Shimon ben Yehuda Hada Amr. Rav Shimon ben Yehuda was the one that we just got finished saying. If you remember the end of yesterday's daf, Rav Shimon ben Yehuda said that dyeing wool does not acquire it when it comes to, does not make a shinoi, kaina. That's when it comes to the 5 wools that you have to shear 5 sheep together, and it's mitzdaref to be mechayiv and reishis hagez. Rav Shimon ben Yehuda held that if you dye the first one, it's not a shinoi, meaning it's mitzdaref with the other one. So you see that a shinoi does not change in halacha. Change in the item does not make a change in halacha. Now Taisus, by the way, Taisus in the bottom as a kasha, very short Taisus, Tema, habitavi va'argu maidu. Rav Shimon Elazar only said his opinion regarding dyeing, but regarding spinning wool, he does agree that that's a change. So how could you say that his shita is that changes don't make a significance in halacha? He agrees that changes make a difference. Meaning, he only said his shita regarding dyeing the wool, but when it comes to spinning the wool and processing the wool, he agrees that shinoi is kaina. So how could you put him in the list of Tanaim who believe that shinoi does not make a change in halacha, that shinoi is irrelevant? He agrees some shinoim are very relevant. So Taisa says, yeah, Taisus don't get lost in this. This list are just Tanoim that don't believe in changes in halacha. Some of them, in an extreme way, no shinoim are significant. Rav Shimon ben Elazar, Rav Shimon ben Yehuda holds that you need it to be a change in the wool itself. Some changes yes, some changes no. So it's a list. It's not everyone on this list is the same. They're all in the list in the same way that they all believe sometimes changes don't matter, but don't get lost in it. So the Gemara says, let's keep going. So Rav Shimon ben Yehuda we already mentioned. Let's go to Beis Shammai. We had this Beis Shammai so we had it 30 days ago. So Beis Shammai said as follows. This is regarding the halacha of, we know there's a concept called esnon zaina, which is that if you give a sheep to a woman as a payment for prostitution, you're not allowed to bring it as a carbon. So now we're going to talk, it's a machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Let's say you give a woman kernels of wheat as payment, and then she grinds it into flour and bakes it into bread. Could she bring that to the Beis HaMikdash as part of, let's say, lachmei toida? Correct. So Beis Shammai is going to say that you're not allowed to, even though it was ground up, because he does not believe that shinoi is significant in halachas. The Gemara says, D'Tanya, nasan lochitin be'esnana, you give her wheat as payment for this nus, v'asan silas, and then she changes it to flour. Or zeisim, you give her olives, v'asan shemen, and she turns into olive oil. Or anovim, grapes, v'asan yayin, and she turns into wine. So tani chada aser, v'tani dech mutter. One brisa says that it's aser, one brisa says that it's mutter. So how do you reconcile these two? V'amar Rav Yosef, tani gurian de maspurka. That's the place. He explained, Rav Gurian of Asburuk explained, it's machlekes Beis Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai oisrin, Beis Hillel matirin. It's machlekes Beis Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai holds that it's aser, meaning although you change the item from kernels to flour, it's still aser because he does not look at shinoi as significance in halacha. Beis Hillel disagrees.
Of course, there's significance in halacha. Make a different bracha on those things.
True. So the Gemara eventually is going to point out that you could argue that Beis Shammai generally does believe that shinoi is significant, but maybe over here when you're dealing with the payment of a prostitute, it's so disgusting to Hashem that this shinoi doesn't matter. It's a very easy rejection, and the Gemara will. So the Gemara continues. The Gemara says, "My time the Beis Shammai, we had this before. What's the source of Beis Shammai that even if you grind the flour, the kernels into flour, it's still aser?" The Amar Kra Gam. The pasuk says Gam. Gam is inclusive, so it's to include even if you made a change, it's still aser. Shneim, gam shnehem, l'rabos shinuehem. Gam shnehem, the pasuk is gam shnehem, that's to include any changes. Beis Hillel, who believe that changes are significant and it's not aser when you make a change, what do? What's their source? Amar Kra Heim. The pasuk says they. So gam is inclusive, Haim, they, is exclusive. So Beis Hillel focuses on the word Haim, which is they, meaning they have to be as they are. If they change, they're mutter. Beis Shammai focuses on Gam, that even if they change, it's aser. Haim v'lo shuneim. Ubeis Shammai haksiv Haim. What does Beis Shammai do with Haim? Which is exclusive. Beis Shammai says, you know what Haim is? Not to say that if you change the item that it's mutter, because it's still aser. But let's say you give a woman a pregnant cow as payment, and then the cow gives birth. You could use the child as a carbon. Haim is to exclude that. So it's not to exclude all shinuim. All shinuim is still aser. But this one, it's mamish not the same item that was given as payment. You gave a cow, and this is a calf. It's a completely different item. Even though it was in the womb, that's not considered payment. Beis Hillel nami haksiv. I'm sorry. Ubeis Hillel. How does Beis Hillel know that it's mutter for the calf? He learns that all both are the same. The point is, anything that's not exactly the original payment is going to be mutter. Beis Hillel nami haksiv gam. What does Beis Hillel do with gam? That again, gam was Beis Shammai's source. That even if you make a change, it's aser. What does Beis Hillel do with the word gam? So the Gemara says, gam leBeis Hillel kasha. That's taka kasha. Beis Hillel cannot explain the word gam. Fine. So this is the second Tana of our list of 5 that holds that shinuyim are not significant, and that's Beis Shammai. Let's keep going. Rav Elazar ben Yaakov Omer, Rav Elazar ben Yaakov Maihi. What's Rav Elazar ben Yaakov Shita? The Tanya. Rav Elazar ben Yaakov Omer, Hareisha gozel sa shel chitin. Sugi in Sanhedrin, you steal sa shel chitin. Now we paskin that if you steal an item, you're not allowed to make a bracha on said item because a mitzvah baba avera. So you steal a sa shel chitin, tachna lashavav, and you turn it into bread. V'hivish menu chala, and you separate chala. Ketzad mevarich. What's the bracha? So says Rav Elazar ben Yaakov, ein ze mevarich el menayitz. That's not a blessing. That's disgrace. Meaning, you stole kernels of wheat, you turned it into flour, turned it into bread. I would say that's a shinoi. It's not the same item. I would say you can make a bracha. But says Rav Elazar ben Yaakov, no. That's not a blessing, that's a disgrace. So you see that Rav Elazar ben Yaakov holds that even though you made a change, we look at it as if it's the original item. And this is what it says in Tehillim, that such a blessing is, again, like a disgusting to Hashem. So you see, Rav Elazar ben Yaakov holds that even though there's a change, it's taka still aser. Keep going. Rav Shimon Elazar is the 4th. Maihi, the Tanya, Klal Zeh Rav Shimon Elazar. Rav Shimon Elazar says like this: Kol shevach sheshbiach gazlin yodei al yoina. Look at these words. It's very, very hard to understand why this would be. You steal a cow, and it goes up in value. So you stole it at 500. Now it's worth 1,000. Yodei al yoina. You made some money, meaning you just pay back the original. You don't return the cow. You keep it. Okay, let's keep going. But you can keep you could return the cow, or you could actually keep the proceeds and give the value of the original cow. But then, now these next lines don't make sense. I told you stole a cow and it went up in value. You made the money. So that means you keep it. But then it says, if you want to return the cow, you can. Okay, but you just told me I made the money. Well, of course, you could always be stupid. I was like, you told me Yadel Yoina. So what's going on over here? So the answer is there are words missing in this statement. My Kamar, what did he mean? This is what he meant to say. Hishbicha, if you stole a cow and it went up in value, noitel shivchai. you don't return the cow, you keep it. And you return the value of the original item. But kichesh, if it went down in value, meaning it got weaker, you could just return it as is. It's a different cow. Let's say a change happened that made it go down in value. Sometimes you see with a cow it goes down in value based on losing weight. But let's say something happened to it that caused it to go down in value. You say just return as is. Why? Because although there was a change, we do not care. So if you steal an item and then a change happens and it goes down in value, you could just return the item as is and say, okay, it's less valuable. Sorry, it changed. I don't recognize changes in halacha. Here's fine. So that's a good source that Shimon Elazar holds. He does not recognize changes in halacha, and therefore, even if the item was changed for the worse, you could just return as is. So if you have a tissue box that's worth $1, and then it gets all ripped up and it gets all beaten up, and now it's worth 25 cents, Shimon Elazar would just say, return the tissue box. There was a shinoi. I don't look at shinoi. Here's the problem, though. Shimon Elazar said, though, that if the item went up in value, you keep it and you just give the cash. Wait a minute. You got to be consistent. Two-way street. You're telling me if you don't recognize changes and you just return the item when it went down in value, you should return the item when it went up in value too. You want to be consistent and say that you don't recognize changes, just return the item as is. So how come when it goes up in value, you get to keep it? That doesn't make any sense, right? The tissue box, it got beaten up, whatever, and it was a change, and now it was worth $1. Now it's 25 cents. Shimon says, just return it. Either it's a change. I don't look at changes. But if a change happened for the better, all of a sudden it got covered in gold, whatever. Now it's worth $5. Shmuel says, keep it and give the $1. Wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense. So the Gemara says, the answer is, that's in order to incentivize tshuva. Meaning, you're right, on a technical level, even if it went up in value, you should return the item as is. But it's going to be very hard for people to do tshuva if they have to return the item. This is a guy who's a thief. So therefore, in order to incentivize tshuva, we will allow him to return the value. So on a technical basis, it should be that you return the item regardless. But in order to incentivize tshuva, we're going to let you keep the item if it goes up in value. Okay, that's the fourth. And now let's go with the fifth. And Rav Yishmael, Maihi, Detanya, Mitzvahs Peya lahafresh min hakama. Right. Peya means that you're supposed to leave a corner of the field for poor people. Now, loy hifresh min hakama. Let's say instead of the corner of the field, let's say you cut it down. Oops, you cut down the whole thing. So ma'afresh min ha'imrim. So still give it to the poor people, whatever. I mean, let's say you're supposed to set aside 100 kernels in the corner of your field. They're supposed to be standing. You cut them down. So give it to them cut. Okay, let's keep going. Let's say it wasn't just cut, you processed it. So give it processed. Now, the only difference is, once it's processed, you have to separate meiser, then give, because the halacha is that once it's processed, it's chayv and meiser. So now if you process it, you got to separate meiser, then give the payah. But then here's the chiddush. Rabbi Yishmael says, let's say you went so far that you actually turned it into bread. You separate a slice of the bread and give it as payah. Now that's a big change from standing grain to a loaf of bread. That's a huge change, and yet Rabbi Yishmael does not recognize the change. He believes that you still give payah even though it's a loaf of bread. So you see, Rabbi Yishmael does not recognize changes. So now we've listed 5 Tanoim who do not recognize changes in halacha, and we're assuming this is something that could be applied to kol haTorah kula. Says the Gemara. Now, here, let me ask you a question. One question before we go back to who's the first of the list? I mean, the second of the list, Beis Shammai. So you're telling me these 5 Tanoim are going with Beis Shammai? Right? Beis Hillel holds. We said before that Beis Hillel holds that if you make a znus, if you give her kernels and then you grind it up, it's mutter because the change is significant in halacha. The only one who disagrees says I don't recognize changes Beis Shammai, and then we listed 5 other Tanoim. So these 5 Tanoim are now they're following Beis Shammai. That's we don't generally do that. We don't like for Tanoim to follow Beis Shammai over Beis Hillel. So the Gemara says. Ichbol Tanoi. All these Tanoim were like matriach themselves, meaning they all got together. Lashminik Beis Shammai to say that we pass like Beis Shammai. That's a strange thing. So Amalei Haki Kami Loi Nechu Beis Shammai Beis Hillel Davar Zeh. The answer is these Tanoim believe that Beis Shammai and Hillel don't argue. Meaning, that assumption that you have that they argue, they disagree. They feel that Beis Hillel agrees that even though there's a Shino, it's a problem. They have a different Messiah on Beis Shammai. They believe that in that area, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both agree. Okay, fine. Now you have over here like this. You have 5 Tanoim that said their opinions, all regarding their own halachas, and we're assuming that this is something that could be applied to Kol Terakula. In Kol Terakula, these 5 Tanaim do not recognize changes. The Gemara is going to easily point out, which is, Adam sort of mentioned it before, and I mentioned it just now, that it's very easy to poke a hole and say each Tana is not something that could be applied to Kol Terakula. Each one was just addressing their specific scenario. That in general, Shinoi is significant, like he said regarding brachas, and there are many areas of halacha where Shinoyim are significant. They said their specific case. Let's see it inside. Amar Rava, Mimai. Rava says, how do you assume that all these Tanaim agree that Kol Terakula changes are not significant? I can go through each one and show each one is the exception. Let's go through each one. Ad kan like Reb Shimon Yehuda Hasam, El Betseva Hoyev Yachal Avirei Deitzafon. Okay, let's go to the first one. Reb Shimon Elazar said that if you have 5 sheep that you're shearing, you have to put it all together. They have to be mitzdarif. And then you separate Reishis HaGeiz. He said, though, that if the first one, if you dyed each one a different color, they still combined. So, it's a change? Change is not significant. If you remember the end of yesterday's daf, it's possible he does not believe changes is not significant. Maybe change is significant in halacha. But maybe he believes that dyeing colors, you could undo it by washing it with soap. So because if you wash it in the dishwasher, the dye goes away, maybe he holds a change is significant, but it has to be a permanent change. That's a non-permanent change. Let's keep going. Let's go Beis Shammai, right? What did Beis Shammai say? Beis Shammai said that if you give a woman a zayna, kernels of wheat, and that she turns into flour, you can't bring it as a carbon. Oh, it's changed. The answer is, Beis Shammai also. Maybe Beis Shammai generally believes that changes is significant. So how come it's still aser? Because Hashem does not want even flour that was given as a prostitute for znus. It's not respectful. Let's keep going. The next one, Rav Elazar ben Yaakov. What did Rav Elazar ben Yaakov say? That if you steal flour and turn it into bread, you can't make a bracha. And challah. What do you mean it's a change? Maybe Ad Kan like Rav Elazar ben Yaakov Hasam leaning bracha should have a mitzvah babavera. I mean, again, maybe Rav Elazar ben Yaakov in general believes that change is significant. Over there, why can you not make a bracha? Because Hashem does not want a bracha in such a situation. Hashem doesn't want challah that you make a bracha. It's mitzvah babavera. Now, by the way, just agav, it's not for now, but the Rishonim point out, most Rishonim believe that mitzvah babavera only applies, as they say, be'idna, which is that the avera and the mitzvah are happening at the exact same time. Right? Like lulav, that you're mekayim the lulav, by picking it up, you're stealing it. Over here, you stole it yesterday, ground it up, turned it into flour, separate challah. He calls it mitzvah b'aver. The Rishonim discuss of whether is this indicative of in general mitzvah b'aver, or is this the Gemara's just way of saying it's a gross bracha?
It's not nice.
Yeah, it's not nice. So, yeah, you have to know. Let's keep going though. Vad kam lekam Reb Shimon Elazar Hasam. Now, Reb Shimon Elazar, what does Reb Shimon Elazar say? If I steal a tissue box, and I said the tissue box, whatever, and a change happens to the item that lessens the value, you could just return the item as is. We've mentioned this many times. There's 2 different types of changes. There's reversible changes and irreversible changes. How do you know what Rav Shimon Elazar was talking about? He just said that if a change happens, you could return the item as is. I don't recognize the change. Maybe he was only referring to reversible changes. But if it was an irreversible change, he would recognize it. I don't know. The Gemara says, maybe he was only referring to a reversible change. But if it was an irreversible change, he would agree with it. So I'm not confident. And the last one is Rabbi Shmuel. What did Rabbi Shmuel say? Rabbi Shmuel said that even if you forgot to separate peah and then you turned it into bread, you could separate peah then. The pasuk says regarding peah, azav tazav. The extra tazav, meaning, generally Rabbi Shmuel recognizes changes. I say, how come over there you still separate peah? A change happened? The answer is, it's exeris hakasa. The pasuk says tazav. Tazav means always give it, like always give peah. So in general, he recognizes changes. If he recognizes a change, then why are you giving peah when it's bread? A change happened. The answer is tazav. That the pasuk is saying that you always give peah, even if a shinoi happens. In general, he recognizes shinoim, but over there it's exeris hakasa. Okay. The Gemara says, "V'chitem aligmar minei." Okay. So you're telling me peah is not the rule; it's the exception. Generally, shinoi is significant, but over there it's the exception because of taza. So learn from it. This is matnas aniyim shani. You can't learn that from Matnas Aniyim. Maybe generally Hashem recognizes changes, but over there he wants the Aniyim to get payah. So Hashem says, even though there's a change, still give it to Aniyim. Okay. The boy Rav Yonasan, as Rav Yonasan said, the boy Rav Yonasan, my time is Rabbi Shmuel. What is Rabbi Shmuel Shita base? Right, we're going back and forth. Rabbi Shmuel again holds that if you forgot to separate payah and you eventually turned it into flour and bread, you could still separate payah from the loaf. Does he hold that in general he doesn't recognize shinuyim, or he recognizes changes in halacha generally, but that's exeris hakasiv? That's the question that the boy Rav Yonasan, my time to Rabbi Shmuel. What's Rabbi Shmuel's shita about? Is it mishum desavar shina in a koina? Is it because he holds in general that changes are not significant? Or perhaps no. In general, Rabbi Shmuel holds that shinoi is significant. So how come I'm separating payah? Okay, so Rabbi Yonasan was even bothered by this. Now here's a kasha. The Rabbanan who don't agree with him, what do they do with Tazoiv? Again, he's using Tazoiv to tell you, at least according to this possibility, that in general, Shinoi is significant, but over here, Tazoiv says that even though you made a Shinoi, you should still give payah. What do the Rabbanan do with that? The Gemara says, Vim timtzi loimer tamid Rishmol shem siver Shina en a koina, Tazoiv yiseir the kasar chon olamali, V'sul Rabbanan Tazoiv yiseir the kasar chon olamali. What do you do with Tazoiv? If you either believe that Rishmol holds in general a Shina is not koina, so you don't need the word Tazoiv, or according to the Rabbanan, what do you do with Tazoiv? The answer is, I'll say outside, we'll see it inside. Tazoiv, according to the Rabbanan, is not coming to say that if you made a loaf of bread, you still give payah, because they don't believe that. Tazoiv means always give payah. So Rabbi Shmuel is saying, even if a shina happened, give payah. The Rabbanan don't believe that. So what do they do with Tazoiv? They hold like this. What if you're mafker your whole field, and then you acquire it back? You still give payah. You were mafker it. L'chora, you could argue that it's not my field anymore. I acquired it like a new field. The answer is Tazoiv says, always give payah. The only thing Hefker will do is it'll absolve you from the requirement of Meiser. You do not have to separate Meiser from something that you acquired through Hefker. But if you acquired the field through Hefker, you still have to give Payah. Why? Tazoiv. Tazoiv means always give Payah. So the Gemara says, they use the word Tazer for the following: Hamafkir karmoi. If you mafkir your vineyard, v'hishkim levakra, you botzroi, and then all of a sudden you acquire it back, chayev beperet, b'oilus b'shichu b'peya. You still chayev in peya, you put him in a meiser. You just don't give meiser. Okay. Now, we said before that Rishim Elazar holds that if I steal an item and then a shinoi happens and it goes down in value, I could just return the item as is. We had a machloikes. Why does he hold that way? Abaya said, you see, he holds that Shina is not significant. Rava says, maybe he only holds Shina is not significant by a reversible change. By an irreversible change, Shina is significant. Those are the two ways to understand Rishim ben Elazar. So says the Gemara, Amr Shmuel halacha Rishim ben Elazar. Shmuel says that we paskin like Rishim ben Elazar. Now here's the question. Did he actually say that? Umi Amr Shmuel hachi, v'Amr Shmuel ein shamed lo leganev lo legazlan izakin. Wait a minute. Shmuel is saying that we pass like Rishim ben Elazar. Now, according to Abaya, Rishim ben Elazar holds Shinoi is not koina in all scenarios. So when Shmuel says the halacha follows Rishim ben Elazar, that is his way of saying Shinoi is not koina. That's his way of saying that. Here's the problem. Shmuel also said, Ein shaman loy leganev loy legaz. You know what Ein shaman means? Ein shaman means like this. Let's say I steal a cow. It's worth $500, and then it dies. What do? Do I return the carcass to you and just say, take it? Or, and even if I have to, and we just maybe figure out the value, says, no, Ein shaman. Meaning, when it dies, you keep it, pay him. So how could both things be true? How could you pass like Rishim ben Elazar that a shinoi is insignificant? Then if the animal dies, I should just return the carcass. Shinoi is insignificant. You're like, it's not the same cow. This cow's dead. Shinoi is not significant. So how do you reconcile those two things? Now, by the way, if you hold like Rava, it could work. Why? Because Rava argued that Rishim ben Elazar generally believes changes is significant. He only said his opinion by a reversible change. But in irreversible change, he acknowledges Shinoi is kaina. The death of an animal is an irreversible change. So it would make sense. But according to Abaya, the Rishim ben Elazar holds across the board, Shinoi is nothing. Don't care, just return the item as is. So then how come Abaya also said, and that's what Shmuel said, then how could Shmuel also say that if if you steal an item and then it dies, you replace the original item. You should just give the carcass back. So the Gemara says, now Bishlam Rava, as I said, according to Rava, that Rishon Elazar does believe changes are significant only when it's irreversible. So Kikamar Rishon Elazar hasam achasha dehadar loy kasha. Kikamar alach Rishon Elazar deshina b'kaim oim achasha dehadar. Kikamar Shmuel hasam ein shavel gam legazlin nezakim b'chasha loy hadar. You can make it work. Shmuel is not contradicting. He said that we pass on Rishon Elazar, and he also said that when the animal dies, you have to replace the original animal. Why? Because it depends. If it's a reversible change, insignificant. Irreversible, significant. But according to Rabbi, it's a little schwer. How could Shmuel paskin, Shmuel ben Elazar, and paskin that when the animal dies, you have to replace the original animal? Just give the carcass back. So the Gemara says, Abaya masni hachi. Amrav Yudam Shmuel, go to the next page. Amru halacha Rishon ben Elazar v'lei loy svirle. According to this version, what you have to say is that Shmuel never said halacha Rishon ben Elazar. Shmuel said they say the halacha of Rishon ben Elazar, but I don't agree that way. That's what you'd have to say, because it wouldn't work. Okay. Amar Rav Chia bar Abaya bar Abba Amar Rav Yochanan. The rest of the daf is very easy, very pleasant. Amar Rav Chia bar Abba Amar Rav Yochanan. Devar Torah on a biblical level. Gezela hanishtonis chayzeres be'ineha. Okay, we've had till now this whole approach, the whole Mishnah yesterday, is that if a shinoi happens, you're kaina it d'oraisa, and you only replace it with finance. You pay the value that it was. Says Rabbi Yochanan, Devar Torah on a biblical level, Gezeira nishtanis chayzeres beinaha. I disagree. I think on a biblical level, you have to return the item even if a change happens. Shenemar, the heishiv is agzeila asher gozal, mikol mokam. So Rabbi Yochanan says, even if a change happens, so I'll tell you what happened. You stole wood and you turned it into a bookshelf, you'd have to take it apart and return it. A change happened. Rabbi Yochanan says, I don't look at changes biblically. So why don't we practically make you return it? Vim Taimer Mishnah Seinu. The Mishnah says that you can just replace it. That's Mishum Takanas Hashavim. That's in order to incentivize tshuva. Meaning, our Mishnah said that if you steal an item and then a change happens, you don't return the original item, you just replace it financially. We said because Shina is kindness. So biblically I don't have to. Says Rav Yochanan, no. Biblically you have to. Why don't you actually replace it? Because it's to incentivize tshuva. If I steal wood and turn it into a bookshelf, and then I know that I have to do tshuva, I have to return the bookshelf, I'm not going to do it. So therefore the Chazal said, don't return the bookshelf, just give the money. Okay, so Rav Yochanan is saying is that there's no such thing as Shina Koina by a Ganef. No such thing. Here's the problem. Miyam Rav Yochanan, did Rav Yochanan actually say this? That change is completely insignificant. Wait a minute. Rav Yochanan passes like a stam mishnah utnan, and one of the stam mishnahs we had yesterday is loyhispik litnu loyat shetzavu pater. We said yesterday that if, let's say, a person takes reishis hagez, so he takes the first shearings of the sheep that he's supposed to give to a kohen, and he decides I'm stealing it from the kohen, and he dyes it purple. You know what the mishnah says? You don't have to give it because you're a kohenet with shinoi. So how could Rav Yochanan say there's no such thing as shinoi koina when there clearly is? So you know what the answer is? The Gemara says, I heard the explanation is You know what the answer is? Depends what type of change. If you steal something and make a change that's irreversible, that is deraisa yours. You do not have to return it. You just give money. When did Rav Yochanan say that it's deraisa you have to return it? By a reversible change. So the answer is it just depends. If you made an irreversible change, that's deraisa yours now. You don't have to return the item. You just give cash. When did Rav Yochanan say that you have to return the item biblically, but the rabbis allowed you to give cash to incentivize tshuva? That's talking about a reversible change. So both a reversible and an irreversible change, you're just going to give cash. The difference is by a irreversible change, it's deraisa, you don't have to return the item. By a reversible change, it's a chazal's takana because they wanted to incentivize tshuva. Okay, now I'll tell you this next Gemara. I'm learning in the morning with Mr. Hach, and we're learning the Shulchan Aruch Magen Avram since the beginning of Aruch Haim, and we're in the middle of Yeridea Ribis. And this next line, I completely did not understand. I read it very wrong. Tan Rabbanon, Hagazlanim umalve beribis, someone who's a thief and someone who gives money on interest, which is also a form of theft. Shehechziron, and they want to return what they stole. Ein mekav mehen, we don't accept it. So I read this as like, we don't accept it because like they're so evil. So I was like, what? And he says, V'im mekablen, and if you accept money from them, ein ruach hachamim noichei menu. The Chazal are not happy with it. Meaning, we are not happy with such a thing. Okay, so this is a very strange thing. So why is this? So what this means is like this: people that make their money on ribbis, we don't want them to have to return the money, because if they do, they'll have no money left. If you make your entire income on ribbis, and when we tell you, hey, you should return it because it's the rice, you have to return it. First of all, no one's going to do it. It's not like they stole a cell phone, give back the cell phone. This is a guy he's had a money lending company for 5 years without ever doing a heter iska. You want him to give him back the money? He'd have to give everything he owns. Right. And therefore, it's never going to happen. He won't end up doing tshuva. And therefore, in order to incentivize, we say, don't accept the money from him. Yeah, can I have the article for 1 second? Just for 1 second. Yeah, it's the opposite. It's not that he's such a bad guy. It's the Chazal wanted to incentivize. I just want to say, 1 second. Yeah. Again, the premise is that it's referring to someone who, it's not like a specific item. He's a thief. Like, he's been the thief. He's been the town thief. If you make him return it, he's going to have nothing left his money. Someone who has a money lending company. What do you call it? What's the thing nowadays, the new popular thing that's like a thuggy business? What's it called? Cash advance. Yeah. Right? If someone does cash advance, but without a heter iska, I'm saying he does Isser cash advance, and then after 5 years, he goes to a shir, and the rabbi says, and he's like, I want to become religious. Okay, I want to be a better Jew. I have to return everything, so I have to sell my house. Like, what? So for that, Chazal said, you know what? Hefker bezin hefker, just as long as he does tshuva, just don't take it from him. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yechanan, how did this evolve? How did this takana evolve? So bimei Rabbi mishnazu. This was evolved in the times of Rabbi. The Tanya. That's a funny story. There was a man who wanted to do tshuva, and he was, I guess, a money cash advance guy, and he wanted to do tshuva. Samarli Ishtay, his wife said, Reika, empty one. You want to do tshuva, you won't even own a belt. She's like, you want to do tshuva? There's nothing in this house that's kept that you can keep. So she's like, empty one, what are you going to do tshuva? You want to be so religious? It's not happening. You'd have to give, what would you keep? This is all ill-gotten gains. So what did he do? So he said, okay, fine, I'm not going to do tshuva. And then he was Mechal Shabbos, and he kept the lifestyle because he felt that it's not possible. So at that point, they decided that if you're a thief, you're malve berivis, and you want to return it, we do not accept it. You're supposed to offer, and we're supposed to say, no, thank you. Meisa have a kasha. Now, by the way, from here into the end of the Amid, we're going to have examples where people returned the theft. So how could you say that you're not supposed to accept it? They did accept. Okay, so let's go. Meisvei avakasha heniach lemavim of moyishel par moyishel ribis. Reuven was this money launder, money chain, whatever. This cash advance guy, and then he dies, leaving a lot of ribis to his kids. So what's the halacha? Avishen yoidishen ribis ein chayim lahachzir. They don't have to return it. Why? This is not because of what we said. This is because the halacha is you do not have to return. If your father stole money and then gave it to you as Yerusha, you are not obligated to return it. He's obligated to return it, not you. What could you deduce from this? Dafka, they don't have to return it because it's Yerusha. But let's say if the father was alive, he would have to return it. Oh, I thought you said that. It should say you don't have to return it because of this takana. It doesn't say that. It says you don't have to return it because the halacha is you're not mechuyev to return Yerusha, that money is passed down by Yerusha. But if the father was alive, he would have to return it. The Gemara says, Inu deloi ha'avim chayv lahachzer. That's the implication. So the Gemara says, no. The truth is the father also doesn't have to do it. So why do you mention the kids? Meaning, if the father doesn't have to return the cash advance, then why you mention the kids don't have to return the cash? Give me a bigger chiddush. The father doesn't have to. The answer is, avada, the father doesn't have to because of this. So why you mention the kids? Because of the next halacha. The end of the halacha is, because the end of the brisa. What does the end of the brisa say? The end of the brisa is like this. Let's say if the father left money that was stolen, do they have to return it? No, for two reasons. First of all, because this takana that you don't have to return the stolen cash if that's how you made your money. And number two, because you don't have to return your father's stolen money. Forget about the takana. But let's say the father, instead of leaving money, the father left a stolen cow or a stolen item that people knew was stolen. You have to return that. Why? For kivud avim. It's Yerusha, and technically Yerusha, you don't have to return theft. Forget about money, right? Money was the takana of Rabbi that they won't make you return money that was stolen. Let's say you stole an item, you stole a cell phone. Nobody would say, you have to return the cell phone. You stole a cell phone, you got to return the cell phone. That's not part of that takana. But the halacha is that if a father stole a cell phone and passed it down to the kids in Yerusha, the kids technically on a biblical don't have to return it because it's Yerusha. But they have to return it. Why? Because kivud avim. Because everybody knows that's a stolen cow. And when they walk past, they're constantly going to say, oh, that's the father stole cow. The father was a thief. So in order for kivud avim, you have to do it. So therefore, the beginning of the Mishnah referred to money passed down as Yerusha, not to say that they don't have to return it because Yerusha. The father didn't have to return it either. So why they mention the kids? Because the end of the Mishnah. Because the end of the Mishnah says that if the father stole a specific item that people knew was stolen and was passing Yerusha, they have to return it. Why? Kivud avim. Because everyone, if they don't return it, everyone's just going to talk smack about the father. Now, by the way, before we go weiter, we'll do it in a few minutes. Before we go weiter, the Gemara is a kasha. The kasha is, why is there kivud avim? I thought there's no kivud avim if the father's a rasha. So the Gemara says, Ikri kan v'nasi ba'amcha lo yisa'ar ba'isa ma'isa amcha. I thought you only have to have kivud avim if the father's a good person. This father's a thief. So what are you saying? Stam, just agav. Father steals a cow and then the father dies. It goes to the kids. The kids have to return it because of kivud avim. Why kivud avim? Father's a rasha. So, huh?
I mean, there's no kivud avim.
Oh, so it's actually a machlekes rishonim, the Rambam and the Tur, whether there's kivud avim when the father's a rasha. And Shulchan Aruch and the Rama argue about this. This Gemara definitely assumes that if the father's a rasha, there is no kivud avim. That's the Gemara's assumption, and it's a shaila on the Tur who says that there is kivud avim. On the Rishonim that say that there is kivud avim on the rasha, there's a whole arichos. The Beis Yosef has arichos on this. The Radvaz. This Gemara is like a crux of a very, very. Maybe we'll talk about this. It's a very, very big shaila. The Gemara definitely assumes, like the Rishonim, that side, that if the father's a rasha, there is no kivud avim, which I believe is the Ramah's opinion. If you hold that, like the Shulchan Aruch, that there is kivud avim in a rasha, you have to explain this Gemara differently. So the Gemara says, so why do you have to have kivud avim? The father's a rasha. The answer, Kedamar Rav Pinchas b'shasa tshuva. The case is the father might have done tshuva, meaning not might have. He did tshuva, meaning the father stole a cow, and then on his deathbed he did tshuva. So he's not a rasha. So wait a minute, if he did tshuva, why didn't he return the cow? So Gemara says, my boy Gabe, he's such a big tzaddik, he did tshuva, then how come he has a stolen cow in his property? The answer is, the case is he wanted to, but he died before he was able to. He was an old man, and he wanted to return the cow, and he did tshuva, and before he was able to return it, so he's not a rasha. That's the case. So let's just keep going. Tashema, we're mentioning right now, again, that if you're malva beribis, or if you steal money, you don't have to return it, because of that takana of Rabbi. Here's the problem. Hagazlan mal beribis afipi shegavu, even though they collected machzirin, they have to return it. Now, by the way, the gavu, collecting is not a good term for theft. If someone steals something from your house, you don't say he collected. He collected. Collection implies something you owe him. It's like, so the Gemara says, Gazlan my shagavu ikka, he guzzle, loy guzzle. When in collection, say it was stolen. Elema, no. Hagazlanim umay niu malva beribis. No, what type of thief? Someone who collects interest. So he collected money owed, but he's a thief. You have to return it. Oh, so how could you say there's a takana not to return it? It says machzirin. The Gemara says machzirin ve'imekavlanim. No. They return it, but you don't take it. Meaning, when it says machzirin, it means they have to knock on the door of the guy they stole and said, "Here's the money back," and then you have to say, no thank you, please keep it. So so when it says machzirin, it doesn't mean they actually return the money. It means they try to return the money, and then you have to say no thank you. That's the process. So they can't just not try. They have to try. Machzirin doesn't mean they return the money. It means they try and aim a kablin. And you're supposed to say no thank you. So the Gemara says, Allah machzirin. So why are they knocking on my door? If I tell you, I'm the rabbi, I tell you, hey, you stole something, you got to knock on Adam's door, and then I tell Adam, don't take it. So you ask, why am I knocking on the door? Because you got to show that you're interested in doing it. Meaning, you got to go through the process of tshuva. The process of tshuva is remorse, and part of remorse is telling the guy, I'm sorry, I would return it to you, but the rabbis don't let me. And if you don't, then it's just a game. So the Gemara says, Tashim, let's keep going. Haroyin, vagaboyin, vahamuchsin. These were people that were thieves. Haroyin, because they would have animals would graze on other people's property. Gaboyin are people that collect ribbis. Vehamuchsin, muchsin are tax collectors. Again, these were all thieves in the times of the Gemara, because the taxes were not, they'd still be, but the Gaboyin Hamuchsin, Tshuva and kasha, look at the words. Their tshuva is very difficult. It's very difficult for them to do tshuva. Umachzirin l'makirin, and they only return to people they recognize. Now, I would read this brisa as, why is it hard to do tshuva? Because if you have to return the money, it's very hard to track who you stole it from. When someone has a Ponzi scheme, loyalenu, such a thing would ever happen. If someone were to have a Ponzi scheme and they had to return the item, tshuva is very kasha, because it's very hard for them to track down who they stole it from. But the implication is they have to return the money. Because if they don't have to return the money, then why is tshuva so hard? I think tshuva is super easy if you don't return the money. So the Gemara says, Amri machzirin, same answer. Ve'in mekalmen. Answer is, when it says they return the money, they don't actually return the money. They try, and then you're not supposed to accept it. The Gemara says, Elam machzirin, let's do shemaim. Ihochi amay tshuva kasha. The Gemara says, wait a minute. If you're telling me that they stole the money and they don't have to return the money, then why tshuva kasha? I think tshuva is super easy then. V'oid, another kasha, ema seifa, let's keep going. Is she'ein makirin, the brisa then says, if they don't recognize who they stole from, yasib and sarchit tzibur, donate it to the klal. So that implies that you return it. So the Gemara says, Amrav Chizdan, what does it mean donate to the klal? Boirish shichin amaris. Give it to, make wells out of it, take the money and make it into wells, whatever. So how could you say, this brisa definitely implies you return the money. So the Gemara says, Loi kasha, kan koidim takana, kan lachet takana. It's very simple. This brisa was written before the takana was instituted, when you actually had to return the item. If you had to return the item, it was tshuva kasha, whatever. V'hashadam Rav Nachman b'shein gzela kayemes afilu tema idividi lacher takana v'loi kasha kan b'gzela kayemes kan b'shein in gzela kayemes. The Gemara says, I have one last answer. The Gemara says it could be this entire thing is very simple. This entire process of the takana that you don't have to return theft, said Rav Nachman, is only referring to cash. If it's an item, you have to return it. Cash, you don't have to. But an item, if you stole someone's cell phone, return the cell phone. So therefore, you can answer very simply. All these brises that imply returning it are talking about items. So when it says tshuva and kasha, that's talking about you stole items, not a Ponzi scheme. You stole items. You stole cell phones. So if you stole cell phones, not cell phone, okay, whatever. You stole belts from people. I don't know how you went into the mikveh and how you stole everyone's pants. That's very hard to return because you got to return it, but you don't know whose pants you stole. Like, let's say someone in a crazy situation. Someone's in a restaurant and they're on a date and they leave their cell phone and their keys in their coat pocket, and then someone comes in, some guy, and just grabs all the coats. Lu yitzur, lo yalenu, such a thing were to happen, and then that's a hard thing to return, except for that guy because he's got a wallet in his pocket. Why is he leaving a wallet on a date? Hey, he's not really thinking too much. Anyways, the Gemara says maybe it were to happen to my father. Now let's just end with this. Wait a minute, but didn't she say in the Iker Takana, remember what was the Iker Takana? There was a guy who was a thief, and he said, I want to do tshuva, and she said, if you have to do tshuva, you won't even have a belt. I thought you have to return the items. If he stole the belt, he should have to return the belt. The answer is Demei Avneit. It means, it doesn't mean the belt. It means he bought the belt. It means money. It means the value of the belt. She's saying that if you have to return the cash, we won't even be able to buy a belt. It's not the actual belt. He never stole items. He stole cash. I will stop here.